The answer to 1984 is 1776.
One-dimensional thinking. I want to do some whole shows on this or special videos on this subject because it's so complex, but at the same time so simple. And it's a fundamental issue of symbols. And there's been a lot of sociologists, political scientists before them, philosophers, psychologists that have written about this. And Madison Avenue and the propaganda masters, they call it perception is reality. Perception isn't really reality. If you're on a bunch of LSD having a full-bore hallucination and believe you're jumping off into a creek, but you really jump off a 50-story building, perception is not reality. Or if you think you're a bird and you're going to fly off a 20-story balcony, well, you're really going to crash and die on the bottom. Perception is not reality. Take a dollar bill. In fact, will somebody give me my wallet over there? I think it's got some money in it. I can't reach over and get it. Thank you. A dollar bill is a symbol of energy, but it's not redeemable. A $5 bill is not redeemable in gold or silver, so it is simply an empty symbol of a commodity. Which again, what is commodity? It's some form of energy or something of value. But people one-dimensionally, I mean, old-timers who were common sense and understood history, they knew how dangerous a fiat currency was. But as we became more and more symbol-oriented, it gets to the point where the symbols have no connection to reality anymore and create almost like a matrix-like system of deception. But here's an example of one-dimensional thinking. I saw a comment in our article on prisonplanet.com last night. The article responding to the White House response to our previous article on Thursday. White House attacks prisonplanet.com report on blackouts. And the commenter said, I don't get it. I'm sick of Alex Jones. He has an advertiser that promotes a solar backup unit. And Alex says, get off the grid. But then Alex is saying, don't let them shut down our coal-powered plants. That's a one-dimensional thought. Anyone thinking in a two-dimensional, three-dimensional, or some can think in a four-dimensional layer would realize instantly in a fractal design hundreds of different angles and points that show how unconscious and one-dimensional that statement was. In the ad, we say there's moves to shut down power plants, to increase prices. We should move to get off the grid. But we need multiple systems of energy. We need cheap industry for our factories and businesses and schools to be competitive. And China and Mexico and others, they get cheaper energy than we do because the globalists have decided to invest in those countries, not here, and they're trying to shut off their competition. But see, that's not even a complex thought, but it's 2 to 3 dimensions deep. So that person sees, I've noticed the weak-minded, they see contradictions where there aren't contradictions. And, of course, the one-dimensional thinking goes further. A lot of people will just say lies about their boss or their employee or anybody and believe them. Real liars believe their lies. And they believe that if they create the symbol in their mind and that if they just say something is, that they've made the decision and now that's the way reality is. They've bought into perception is reality. They've bought into the packaging. And it's just extremely frustrating to see something like that when obviously we're saying it'd be great if we could all have solar power, if we could all be off the grid and independent. The point is our society and system is set up, and in the interim, we don't want to let the globalists come in with promises of Valhalla when their real goal is to only allow their coal-powered plants to operate, so there's artificial scarcity, so they make much larger profits in the end game. And they're already making those bigger profits by creating artificial scarcity and power. If there are plenty of power plants, and anybody can set one up as long as they're clean, then that cuts into the globalist incredible profits. The globalists make huge profits and consolidate power through controlled markets that they're able to get through government power. And so it's that wedding of the mega corporations with government that is the great tyranny, that is the great tyrannus. And there's so many other examples of one-dimensional thinking. You know, the TSA, Homeland Security, puts out a report, we want to stop child trafficking at the Super Bowl. And a one-dimensional thinker just takes it and says, must be true, government said it. Meanwhile, if you have two, three-dimensional thinking and historical understanding and have the data, you know the government's one of the biggest traffickers in women and children, and that this is all just a PR stunt, but to protect themselves, they've got to have the movement against their own system so they can control any of the investigations. See, that's three-dimensional thinking. We'll be right back. Okay, trying to get into higher levels of thought. One-dimensional thought is really not a natural state for humankind. We've been artificially put into this because of television, the internet, and society more and more. It's always played a role in deceptive governments and systems. But just to break down one-dimensional thought. One-dimensional thought at a subconscious level would be if you were watching us live via video right now and you think that you're here in the room with us. Or when you go to a movie theater and watch a film and suspend disbelief and actually just start accepting it all as true, and your subconscious and your conscious basically become one for a period, and you accept it all as real. When you're watching that horror movie and you think the zombies are real and you're getting scared, that's one-dimensional thinking. And one-dimensional thinking, of course, is associated with lower brain function and basic instincts. But another example of it is obviously so-called money. When I call this money, I'm engaging in one-dimensional speech. I know this isn't really what we think of as real money that's backed up by a real commodity and that's redeemable in wheat or gold or salt or whatever's been valuable throughout history, or land. Things that are associated with energy, this now becomes a certification or a symbol of exchange. But now they've removed any connection to any real tangible wealth from the money, and so they've brought us into this one-dimensional system where a lot of people will kill their own grandmother for a stick of bubble gum. But another example of one-dimensional thought is people still believing politicians and just accepting whatever they say as if it's the received truth, kind of in a suspended disbelief mode of just receiving, not actually thinking. And to simplify it, complex thought, complex business, complex relationships, the most unsuccessful failures that we meet in life are people that are like wild animals. They see things one-dimensionally. They'll buy into any con. They'll go along with any false idea as long as it's packaged correctly. And they never think about what's really contained in the symbol and what it's connected to, if anything. And they never think about the causal relationships of doing one thing. Well, what is that going to cause? And then what is that going to trigger? And what are the possible outcomes of the ramifications of that development as it divides out into a fractal design, similar to the butterfly effect or throwing the pebble into the pond that causes the massive overall ripples. Tiny pebble, if you have a very still pond and you throw it in, you'd be amazed at how it causes ripples to go all the way across the pond and then bounce back, and it could go on for several minutes. Massive overall energy output compared to the tiny amount of energy that the pebble first exerted. Now, when you enter other energy drivers like the wind or kids splashing around in the pond, now the pebble isn't as noticeable. And that's why the globalists politically want you watching TV, responding to their stimuli, following their matrix false reality as they walk you deeper into unconsciousness and one-dimensional thinking. Because when you act on your own, when you act in a multi-dimensional thought process and then put it into action and actually manifest it through actions, you begin to cause ripples in the universe, ripples on our planet, economically, spiritually, physically. You begin to actually have an effect and leave a mark on the world. They don't want you on the field. They want you as spectators, so their pebbles or the boulders they're throwing into the pond have the biggest effect. But the winds of change, millions and millions of people doing little things every day to further increase their understanding of knowledge and to further put that spread of knowledge out to others and to promote moral ideas which are universal in mankind. The first thing the globalists do is tell you there are no morals, you can't have a view, there is no right and wrong, so that you don't have a position. Then they come back with all of their morals about shut down free speech because it's hurtful and shut off energy because it's hurtful. They always moralize, but then they're telling you, you shouldn't moralize. Because when you do pick the position that's best for humanity, that's best for you, that makes you sleep good at night, that you know is wholesome, when you make those right decisions in life, it's winds of change they can't stop, and no amount of propaganda and lies can reverse the smallest amount of truth. And when you begin to put off the truth, when you begin to put it out into the universe, it has an effect. This is scientific. And I'm now getting into philosophy, and this is the type of stuff I think about 24 hours a day. I have dreams about this constantly, my understandings of it. But they're very afraid of you and the power that you have. And that's why the globalists admit in countless white papers that we've covered here that they wanted to make us promiscuous, that they wanted to make us animalistic, because that stuff's addictive, but it's lower brain, and then it makes us more easy to control. They're threatened by a true human. They're threatened by true dynamic understanding, because most people, if they ever actually see the truth of the universe and the world, if they ever tap into that great truth, they then will immediately see all the corruption, the evil, the cancer in society, and you will not even have to have courage. You will hurl yourself towards the tyranny in an attempt to block it, because at a fundamental level, you understand it's threatening to all that's good. So they want you in the flesh. They want you in a lower state of awareness. They want you to be stunted because you're threatening to them. They understand the secrets of humanity, the secrets of our potential, and they have greedily decided to dumb everybody down, put a police state grid in, have controlled bioweapons releases, each one worse than the last, as they set up a tighter and tighter grid and basically wipe the majority of us out in the next 30 to 40 years, perhaps even sooner. But it's now being phased in. It's all documented, all admitted what they're doing. And it's something that is going to hurt 99.9% of us, and in the end, hurt the globalists themselves. There could be two globalists in a high-tech crystal palace 100 years from now. Two globalists left. They've got total life extension. They've merged with the cybernetic interfaces. They can, do things that are, to the ancients would be godlike, but they still, at their core, were wicked people that made the satanic decision to engage in nihilistic exploits of power grabbing, and they're still self-destructive at their core, and their projection on the outside world of wanting to enslave and degrade and dumb down, that's going to come back on them. And those two final entities, those transhumanists, will rip each other to pieces and will destroy whatever creations they've made in an attempt to get the ultimate throne of power. This is a system that will extinct all life. This is a dark force that will give no quarter and must be resisted 110%. All right, I'm getting into some pretty heavy stuff now, but start little mental exercises of thinking about chain reactions in the economy, in business, in relationship, in lives, in everything you're doing. And learn to study how they interact. And at first, you won't have a lot of skill at this. But as you focus your mind on it, more and more you will develop what is known as discernment. And obviously some of us are gifted with more of it than others, but all of you have it. And I suggest you use it, because your life will be so fulfilled. I am so alive, I am so awake that it's painful. my knowledge curve is growing so fast, and it's so frustrating that I can't even articulate it. And the gifts that God has given us are so wondrous. The eye has not seen, the ear has not heard what God's got planned for the species. Think about how fast things have changed. Think about how we just got the internet really in the last 20 years. I mean, it was around in the 60s, but officially in the last 20. Think about how just 100 years ago we got automobiles. Think about how people just take electricity for granted. Think about how people take it for granted that the sum of knowledge is got to be billions of times what it was just 100 years ago. You can search instantly all the libraries of the world. You can search information on 1 trillion different subjects. You can get different views and different ideas from thousands of different perspectives on each issue just via the internet. The sum of humanity communicating with each other and advancing knowledge. It's got a lot of bad things as well. It's the spectrum of humanity. But just like children, you go to Africa or you go to Latin America and you go to the poorest areas and you see starving children, their eyes are alight, burning with the human spirit. It looks like old black and white photos I've seen of my ancestors 150 years ago, 100 years ago, even 60 years ago. You look at every one of them, their eyes look wild with electricity. My eyes are dim compared to theirs. But you go and you see starving villagers, little children with their ribs sticking out of them, and their eyes are on fire, and they're cheerful, and they're happy. And if you give them a tin can to play with, they will cry, and they will thank you. And when you talk to those children, they have great intuitive knowledge, spiritual knowledge, because they're so close to death. Children who don't have enough food appreciate it. Children who don't have enough knowledge appreciate knowledge so much, they're questing for it, so they're already wide open like a flower to the sun and already have inherently all the knowledge of their soul and their ancestors in them. But then you look at my children. Beautiful, electric eyes, eating healthy food, wondrous compared to many other children I know who are eating all the toxic garbage and who are watching television. But still decadent. Always wanting certain types of food. A poor, starving African or Asian child would gobble up spinach or Brussels sprouts and beg for more. But my children, even if I try to not make them decadent and weak, they're like I am. They're not as hardy because they've had it so good. See, we have all the knowledge of the world, but because we have so much knowledge, we don't even care. The general public, who cares about the 3 branches of government? Who cares about quantum mechanics? Who cares about fission fusion? Who cares about heavy cyclotrons? Who cares about weather modification? Who cares about cross-species chimeras? Who cares? Because it's all there, so what? I'm going to go to the bar and get drunk. Yeah, that's what they say. Or I'm going to go to the topless bar, or I'm going to go watch a football game. And so the world kills us with the large S. The system kills us with just this fount of food and entertainment and distractions. But notice everything the globalists push, everything that they really drive on you is death to the species. And they're smart, and they've talked about it. Go back 80 years ago or so, they said, we've got to take over the education in this country. I have the U.S. National Banking Association from actually 1898. Read it on air where they said, we got to take over the media. We got to dumb people down. Have you read a newspaper from 235 years ago when this country was getting founded? I mean, they weren't showing off with their use of language. They were really into it to use wide-spectrum, delicate words woven together to truly express their deeper thoughts and understandings. The average commoner was using words and complex ideas than top professors today. I can barely read a newspaper from 1780. It's hard to read a newspaper from 130 years ago. The language is being destroyed. The use of words, their meanings is being changed, where people can't even basically communicate with each other anymore. And the globalists practice disinformation and practice dumbing down the culture. And those that understand this, they are advanced. Up to this advanced as you destroy your own species that you're bound to for eternity. This is what the heart of the matter is really all about. We are being inserted into an electronic matrix. We are not communicating with each other. Children at restaurants that I look at all have handheld video games. They're not talking to their parents. They're at the school all day. We are being programmed. And once you aren't connected to the real world and street smarts and common sense, now as you're raised up with a tablet in your hand giving you what the government wants you to see, now they can give you symbols that aren't even connected to any reality. The globalists know what they're doing. And so right now they're trying to sell us on total tyranny as if it's a good thing because they believe the majority of people are disconnected from reality enough now that they can't even communicate and can't be reached or helped. We're reaching a critical point, and humanity's starting to wake up and struggle because humanity knows how much danger it's in collectively. But I don't think there's a more important subject than the one-dimensional thinking. And once they get you in one-dimensional thinking, then they can remove all trappings of reality and put people into a false reality. And many ancient cultures could artificially do this even with low-tech means. Generationally, the priest class would train the public to even give their children up to be sacrificed. Why? It's an act of total submission to go against the very human instinct. Every culture did it. It's a tropism. You know how a plant grows. The seed's designed. Well, tyranny grows a certain way. It builds a certain system. The Japanese, 500 years ago, 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago, had the exact same feudal caste system with knights and castles, fealty to a lord, to an emperor, to a shogun, exactly as they had it in the Aztec kingdom, exactly as they had it in European kingdoms. These are cultures that hadn't communicated with each other, but they build the same systems. Tyrants, just like a certain species of spider. These scientists that study arachnids, you know, they can tell you, even if the spider's been eaten by a bird, what spider spun that web, because they know the fingerprint. They know the signature. And with the globalists, we've seen the web they've spun, but this is something new. This isn't the same web. They've taken all the old webs of tyranny and laid them over each other and then put a new high-tech web over that web. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, whoa, this is a kill grid. And the globalists and all their publications go, you better believe it is. We're going to kill you.